Hello, I'm Lauren, and welcome to Improving the World. I'm an international improviser based in Hong Kong, and I speak to amazing improv women all over the world. Today, being no different, I talk to Celine Camera. She is a French improviser based in Luxembourg, and we're talking about self-identity, and more specifically, the fact that Celine, being a Black woman, spent some time in the US doing improv and studying there, and how that helped to shift and change her perspective and approach to both the teaching and her performing and some of her character choices. I hope that you enjoy. And by the way, have you subscribed yet? You know you wanna. Come on, subscribe. Today I have with me, all the way from Luxembourg, the very kind and wonderful Celine Camera. In fact, is that how you pronounce your name, or am I saying it wrong at all?
You pronounced it perfectly.
Nice one. Well, the fashion brand Celine just has educated us all. Or Dion, maybe she started it. I don't know. Let's talk first about where you are, the fact that you're in Luxembourg. I'm guessing there's not a giant improv scene there. Tell me, what's the improv like in Luxembourg?
I mean, as Luxembourg is already quite the tiny country, as you might know, we have a nice small scene. It's such a small country that you also have a lot of expatriate people, but you're also very close to different borders. So we have a lot of Belgian improvisers, French improvisers on the other side. We've created a federation of the different improv groups. So now we have like 14 improv groups with Luxembourgish companies, some Eastern French companies, and also some Belgian companies. So it's a bit of a melting pot. We have like 200 members in total. But as for Luxembourg,
you have 200 people in Luxembourg doing, what's the population?
The population in total is 600,000 persons.
And 200 people doing improv? Oh my God.
I mean, the 200 people are also covering people doing improv in Belgium and in France. So I don't know exactly how many improvisers we have in Luxembourg, but actually a fair number. There are in total, just in Luxembourg, I think 7 groups doing improv. It's lively and it's also growing, which is really cool. I arrived back in 2012. I started doing improv in Luxembourg in 2014. But what was really cool was the fact that there is not like a big heritage of like a specific style of improv. So it's very eclectic. People are very open towards other countries. Like we go and get training also in France, in Belgium, a bit everywhere. And so it left a lot of room to explore, to try new things. That's what I love about it, is that it's always growing. It's always trying to discover new things, and without having like a super old style approach, very straight one to one thing or another. So
I think I'm automatically jealous. I'm looking out the window right now. I'm judging Hong Kong because we have 8 million people and we clearly do not have enough improvisers. I can't believe that Luxembourg is the size of a peanut and you have so much going on. That's amazing.
A cool peanut.
So you left your career. You were doing other work, Celine, and then you chose to leave that a few years ago to pursue improv in a more full-time capacity. Tell me about that transition and why you chose to do that and how it happened.
Yeah, so I was a jurist. I was doing legal research. I studied law both in France and in the UK. And then I moved to Luxembourg to write my PhD. And I was also doing legal research. It was kind of fun at the beginning, working with really cool people from all over the world, your first job, exciting, etc. And I was also teaching. It was really cool. I started being very involved in the small improv scene that we have, playing, organizing shows without really knowing what we were doing, but just out of a lot of enthusiasm with a lot of other people from different backgrounds, from different careers. And it became such a big part of my life. And at the same time, I had a bit of a crisis, an existential crisis. I liked what I was doing in terms of research and law, but at the same time, I realized that I never really chose to do that. It was sort of normal to go for these studies, and then you turn like 28, and you're like, oh, is it really what I want to do? I was also struggling with my PhD, procrastinating a lot, getting a bit down about it. And I was just waking up in the morning to do improv, really. There was no room for law anymore. And I realized that was not what I wanted to do, that I wanted to become an actress. And so I stopped everything. It took me, let's say, 2 years in total to sort of process everything, talk about it to my family. Everybody was so supportive. Once I made the decision that I wanted to stop, it was sort of like an open driveway because everybody was like, stop it already. I mean, we see that you're miserable and that's the only thing you're thriving for is to be on stage. That's how everything changed, and I'm super happy about it.
Yay! And as part of this process of you deciding that you wanted to change what you were doing and how you were spending your time, you went to the US to do some improv there, right? You were with IO, is that right?
Exactly, yeah.
I'm wondering how it's different because I've never done improv in Luxembourg and I have some knowledge about the French improv scene, and I'm curious how it felt with the European background going to the US, and especially in Europe. I've talked about this with a few people. Many Europeans love kissing, like not just do it because it's a thing, but like they love kissing. And in the US, it's very much often don't touch me. Boundaries are super important. So how did it feel both going to the US and the boundaries and consent and like sexuality and stuff?
Yeah, so as you say, it's funny because of course I have little distance on that, but it's true that practicing improv here in France, Belgium, Luxembourg, in terms of boundaries, they can be very tactile. In the US, it's true that it's another maybe way of playing where people are more distant in this regard, but also I do think that they tackled in a more straightforward way some issues about it. I don't know how it was in the past, but I know that when I was there, I had some discussions with some improvisers and they were saying that the fact of like being in contact with people, with kissing people, is something extremely touchy that has been also addressed. And I think that's where it's interesting, is that people talked about it, and I think there are like charters also about protecting people and making sure that there is consent, and I think that's super important. In Europe now, there is also a tendency, I see some initiatives being in Germany, in Belgium, I think in France, to be more open about talking about it. I think that's the main point. To me, having some rules about no, we should not touch on stage doesn't make any sense. However, being aware of the fact that we need to address that to make sure that you're not going to kiss someone on stage while there is no consent, and it's not because it's improvised that you can do whatever you want. This is definitely not something that is fine. That's super important. So I think people tend to address it. I also teach, and that's something that I try to address, especially in groups where people know each other very well. Because, you know, that's where it can be also even more tricky, is that people think, oh, yeah, it's fine. So you just kiss people. And then you never really wonder, was that okay? Was the person okay with it? Yeah. So I think it's important for everybody to speak out about it, whether they feel comfortable with it. Also to gauge, to raise the issues. I think it's super important. Big difference.
You bring up some really good points. And it's funny because coming from an American context, you're right. We do love to talk about it. I mean, sometimes it's a bit too much. Sometimes I'm like, we're still talking. But you're right. It is very much this, let's deal with it head on. Let's manage this. The other thing I think you said, which is so key, is that when you know someone really well, maybe you're being assumptive about how you can touch them. And I just had a conversation recently with our group. We've known each other for so many years, but we sat down and had like a refresher discussion. And one of the things that came up was, it wasn't even about sexuality. People were saying, you know, I'm getting old and my back's hurting, so please don't pick me up. And just things like that, being kind with people's bodies so that the playing is not distracted by what's going on inside of Lauren's head versus the character.
Totally.
And also, P.S., I really enjoyed that you maybe unintentionally threw in a pun. You said the kissing and sexuality is a little bit touchy. Touchy subject. Never mind.
I didn't even attend it.
I love it. The tactileness was something that was different. Were there other things that were different when you went to the US scene and you were there doing improv, or was that the main one for you?
No, I saw it, but I wouldn't say that wasn't necessarily the main thing, although super interesting to see culturally the approach to things. And it's good because then also it questions your own practice. The other thing, I mean, that was the most important part for me was first to see Black improvisers, which is something not so common. Then, of course, there are US Black improvisers, so it's also different. There are African Americans, and let's say I'm Black, I'm European, so it's already completely different. Although we share the Blackness, doesn't really mean much, but there are still some correlations, of course. I'll get to that point. But yeah, what was super interesting was, I would always remember, it's like a 5-week program, and week 3, I had for the first time of my life a Black teacher. And of course, I mean, it's not, he arrived, I was not like, oh, wow, a Black teacher. But what was super interesting is how he talked about his own path, the way he got into improv, but also how it is for him to be a Black improviser here in Chicago. He was originally from Chicago, and addressing how, for example, they decided to create an all-Black group of improvisers with this idea and this need that some of them, Black improvisers who were definitely a minority, were kind of tired to very often be sort of contained super cliche roles. He told us, I stopped counting the time where I was playing a slave on stage, which,
oh my,
you know, it's
God.
interesting. He said it, you know, like without crying or anything. It's just, it's just a fact.
I don't even know if I've done a scene ever with a slave, regardless of what color someone was. I just don't. Ooh, how unsafe.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, I mean, it's totally possible, I guess, to do scenes with slaves, and they can be cool and interesting, and it doesn't have to be something awful. But the problem is that I think what he was really pointing at is that we put him in a case, you know, because they were tired of being put in a specific case. They just felt like, I just want to be on stage, just be myself, be my individual. And to be able to reach that is going to be way easier if I play only with Black people. I think there is definitely a first step is where they can talk about what they've been through, about their experience of maybe being the only Black player and being contained to a role. Mm-hmm. And then from this point, which is super liberating already, to know that you're not on your own and that it's not just in your head and it's not that you're just sort of paranoid or anything. And then being able to play and without being able to play whatever you want, without at any point feeling labeled. And at the beginning, I was like, interesting, but from my very French approach, I was like, but you know, like in France, it's completely different from the US. It's not the same history, it's not the same things, but there is very much this idea that everybody is the same. We should all be living together. The fact that you're Black or white doesn't matter. We're all the same. People are colorblind. Like we have a very colorblind approach to difference, I would say, to racial difference especially. And so from a French perspective, I was like a bit, that's interesting. But at the same time, I was like, yeah, okay, but this cannot be an end. You know, it's just maybe a means to be able then to all play together, which I think they wouldn't deny it. But I felt a tiny bit uncomfortable with the fact of only playing between Black people, you know? Very, very French reaction that I had. I was a bit like, is this really the right thing? A lot of French people, I think, would say, but no, that's not the solution. And this is like a communitarism, which is a very bad word, you know. And I was a bit skeptical, I would say. And so I went to see their shows. I hope they still exist. It's called 3P, 3PEAT.
Oh, like repeat, but three-peat.
3P, exactly,
okay.
Yeah. And they're brilliant. I mean, they're brilliant improvisers. They're brilliant on stage. And you can see they're just fucking brilliant. All of them. It's just like a concentrate of brilliantness. They play everything, and at the end of the day, are they Black, white? I mean, it really doesn't matter at all. Of course, they have some references that they can play with together in a different way than if it was maybe a mixed cast or whatever. Yeah, they're just brilliant, and that was the main point. So yeah, it brought me to think a lot. At the beginning, I was like a bit, weird. Then I went and seeing them play, and then I started really reflecting on that, you know, because I realized that's very French and Black French that I am. I was also very much like into sort of a denial in a way, because personally, I've been most of the time when I play as a Black improviser, I'm very often the only Black improviser in the group of people who I am playing with. I am also very often the only Black person in the theater hall, because also in the audience tends to be extremely white too. So I started at this rapport in a different way. What I saw as my reality that I accepted because it's the way it is, it was interesting all of a sudden to question it. And I also realized how all this has shaped me in the way also I play. Until recently, until this moment I went to Chicago, I would sort of forbid myself, unconsciously, consciously, depending, forbid myself to play actively Black characters. What I would call actively Black characters, meaning a character for whom the color matters. Because I've been very often, especially at the beginning when I started improv, also contained into a case. I guess that it's something that you can also draw a parallel with, you know, when you're a woman on stage sometimes, especially like in short form, where like cliches can be the thing that we're going to go to because it's easy and the audience likes it and blah, blah, blah. There was also this tendency like, okay, you get on stage, okay, she's the cleaning lady. You start talking to me with like a West Indies accent that I don't even know, so I'm not going to try to do it. things like this, you know. And because I kind of forbid myself to go down this line, to be an actively Black character. And I would always remember the first time I got on stage, there was a scene where we were in a zoo and we were animals. And all of a sudden, my first instinct was, I want to be a monkey because I love playing the monkey. I think I do it very well. And I went there, I did my monkey bit, and then the guy who was maybe the zoo owner started doing some meta and saying, oh, you're not scared of cliches. Like to say, which I had to think about it, and I thought, actually, yeah, no, I don't want to forbid myself from playing a monkey. Why would I? Because I love playing a monkey. So yeah, okay, I'm Black. And so it started, I was very defensive back then. I thought, okay, I'm never going to play a monkey again because I didn't like it. It hurt myself for some reasons. I mean, now with distance, I just realized that there was no real reason to be hurt, but it still resonated in a weird way to me. For every time I've been assigned, or just because it's cool, you can do the joke, there is a Black person on stage. And since it's not so often, yeah, let's be cliche, but except this time it's going to be concrete because we have a Black person, let's do it. And so back from the US, I just thought, okay, I start talking about it with the people I'm teaching. It's just how things are. Most of the time, we're mainly white people on stage, white people in the audience, and the only way we're talking about minorities, Muslim, Asian people, Black people, who don't even have to be foreigners, to be fair, it's always with very big cliches. So the only way we represent minorities is through cliches. I mean, we can use cliches, but we can also go beyond it. We can blend things because cliches don't have to be wrong. It's just like maybe a picture taken at a moment. But let's expand because this is not what I want to do on stage, actually. Yeah. So now, since I came back from the US, I started thinking a bit more, and I've been talking to people because those are things that were boiling in my stomach and I was in my guts on my own. Who you're going to talk to? I had the opportunity to be on stage with a couple of Black people in my life, which we've never really necessarily tackled these issues. But when you see that there is another Black person, you're like, ah, nice. It feels good. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily get along particularly well on stage, but it's a bit reassuring. Since at least I came back from the US, I started thinking, and now I'm fine with also playing actively Black people, and I choose to do it. If I don't do it, who else is going to do it, you know? So I don't feel like I have a duty, but I feel free to do it and to also make points I want to make. And I'm not scared. Also, if somebody comes to me and sort of put me in a case that, okay, you're the Black prostitute or I don't know what, okay, I'm not going to just let you define myself. I'm going to create my character. It's fine. We can collaborate around it, or I can just react, but in plain awareness, no more denial. And I think that's important. It's okay for people to make silly assumptions, racist jokes on stage, etc. But it's just important then to be able to reflect on it. I don't want people to think, and I don't want to be on stage and think, can I say this or can't I say that? I don't think that's the way you really learn. But then it's good to be able either to reflect, to talk about it afterwards. I'm not scared anymore to tell somebody, okay, here actually I was extremely uncomfortable in this scene because blah, blah. If I'm not able to do it while playing, because I think that's something you can do in different ways.
It sounds like off the back of the US trip, both this cognizance of how you choose to represent, how you engage with people when they label you was something that was happening. And I'm also wondering for you as a person who identifies as a woman, how does gender fit into this discussion or how you feel? Because in the improv landscape globally, it's pretty fair to say that women are more of a minority. So if you are navigating the gender challenges as well as the color blindness or not challenges, you're kind of double-barreled. You've got two things that you're trying to manage. Or is it where you are, it was like gender blind? Do you find that it's like that or no?
No, it's not.
No.
It's also a part of the struggle, although it's two different issues, but I'm pretty much for intersectionality in terms of struggle. And I do think that the parallel can very much be made. It's a bit the same process for me. When I started improv, I was mainly doing short form and I loved playing male characters. was something that I loved. And then after a while, I realized that the reason why I was playing male characters, I loved it. I still love it. It was mainly because I wanted to be assertive on stage, thinking that, okay, let's say that there are only male, I'm the only female. I'm going to play also a male to sort of assert myself. And then I talked to a lot of people who were saying, but you know what? I mean, you can also play a strong female character. So that was the first part of the reflection. It goes to show how shaped and formatted we can be. Yeah. That was the first step. And second step was I play in a duet with a friend of mine. It's a female improv duet. And it's a narrative long form company that we have. And we play like 1 hour improvised play with the idea really to get through the complexity of characters. So that was also liberating in a way to first offer rather female characters with their variety, different facets of the characters. But also sometimes, I mean, I did it once, maybe I played a male character for an hour with also this idea of expanding and not being only something super cliche. Yes, it's something that I try and keep in mind and talk about it to the people I teach. There are not so many female teachers. Our scene here is nice. Still more male teacher, and you see that the perspective is not the same, and it's interesting to have both. It's super important to me that I never let just things slide. I try to raise awareness about it.
I can't remember what it's called now. There's a term. What's it called? It's a German word or something. There's something that you've never heard of before, and you learn about it, and all of a sudden you see it everywhere.
Yeah. Is it the Baden-Meinhof effect?
No? Yeah.
Baden-Meinhof?
Baden-Meinhof, yeah. So, you know, like for anybody who hasn't heard of it, so maybe you've never heard of a poodle before, and somebody tells you about a poodle, and all of a sudden you're walking, and all you see is poodles. For me, sometimes in some of this discussion that we're having now, similar to your trip to the US, I've done this with a lot of these discussions I've had in these interviews with people. I think that I'm living like this with no blinders. And then I have this discussion with someone about whatever, some specific thing. And I realized that actually I was like this, and all of a sudden now everything I see is poodles. So for me, part of this discussion is about the fact that you are talking to other people because you are raising awareness, and through that, suddenly they will continue to see poodles all the time. We'll have more Black people who want to go to the theater where you are, or who want to perform, or women who want to be up on stage, or people who feel that they should be breaking the boundaries of what the character should be. Or I would love to see the Black West Indian stripper who is high status and runs the mafia and takes over or something, right? Yeah. But we have to talk about the poodles first so that we know about it and we see them everywhere, you know? Right. Well, that was a weird analogy.
No, but I love it. And I think it's totally true. Yeah, for me, the most important part is talking. I mean, first of all, I had to talk to myself to realize, okay, where am I? And also right now with the continuity of the Black Lives Matter movement, it's really also, first thing I have to do is sort of go into my potential traumas that I had, the reality that I accepted to question things. It's so hard already to do that, to be able then to express it for yourself and then to be able to talk about it. But talking is so important. And there are so many stupid people who are just going to tell you, oh, we can't say anything anymore. We can't play anything anymore. Actually, the point is that we need to talk first and we see where we're at. It's not like a policy. It's not the police of politically correctness, etc. It's that there are so many issues, so many underlying issues that we need to appropriate ourselves with and make peace with, but we're all in this together. It's not like, oh, that's your problem. It's tricky. It takes time, but dialogue is the only thing that can help us really moving forward.
Yeah. Well, on that note, let me ask you, please, if you would like to share words of wisdom, what might they be? You could speak to anyone. I will entice you with maybe you're speaking to the younger version of you or the improv community as a whole, or it could be someone who's hanging out on the internet at 3 a.m. and they find this video. What might your words of wisdom be?
I would say this would be for a younger version of me, but I think it would be for a lot of people with what we've just talked about, identity, about all this. Don't let people label you, or at least don't let those labels get under your skin. And when I talk about labels, I'm talking very broadly also in terms of improv. Good labels, like the fact that, oh yeah, you're like a punchliner, or you're like a hard player, or you're blah, blah. it's good. Try to know who you are. Try to stick to your strength, to expand them, but don't let people put you in a case, be it of positive things as much as what you can perceive as being negative. Everybody should find their own path, but it's super important to be aware of these labels, to receive them in a way or another, but certainly not to stick too much to them, because otherwise you're dead.
Beautiful. And finally, how can people find you? So if anyone is traveling through the general Belgium, France, and Luxembourg region and they want to see a show, or what's a typical Luxembourg drink?
Sparkling wine.
Yeah. If anyone wants to buy you a glass of bubbles, okay, I do. I want to buy the bubbles. But if anyone is passing through and they want to hang out, have a chat, watch a show, be supportive, how can people find you on this giant internet?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm very bad with social media, so I have a Facebook account. You can find me there. Otherwise, in terms of shows, you can find me in the local improv community on the fle.lu website. FLE for Fédération Luxembourgeoise d'Improvisation, so for the Luxembourgish Improv Federation. But if you can contact me on Facebook, I'll be happy to reply.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for your time and your energy and your kind thoughts. I really appreciate it. That brings us to a close. Thanks, Celine.
Thank you, Lauren. It was great. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Anytime. You're welcome back with me and the creepy doll heads.
Yeah, I love them.
There's like a couple of really good smiley weird faces behind me. They're so good.
There is also some lipstick, and it's pretty cool.
It's pretty great, yeah. All right, everyone. This is Improving the World. I'm Lauren, and there's more where that came from. Bye, all. So, did you love the video? If you did, please say kind and wonderful things in the comments down below, and you could subscribe if you're feeling sassy, and look for more Improving the World. Thanks.